So, if you somehow won a lottery and had unlimited power, what would you do with it? I've been dwelling on this question for a long time. And it would be great at first, wouldn't it? I mean, there would be so many things that you could change. Hey, not enough checkout people at Walmart? Come on, you could change that, right? Blink of an eye. Your traffic situations, wouldn't that be just useful in traffic situations? You could get the lights timed right, and you could take care of all the idiot drivers out there, that kind of thing. You could just like that, and maybe they're gone or something like that. I don't know. But sooner or later, as we're using ultimate power, we start to realize, I'm taking away the power of other people. I'm deciding who gets to and who does not get to exert their power. I am taking freedom away from other people to do my bidding. How long would it take you? How long would it take you before, and it would always be justified, wouldn't it? I would only do this in a way that is justified, right? Till I'm having a bad morning, until I'm tired, until I make a mistake. If we had ultimate power, what we would end up doing with our ultimate power is to take power away from people who had lesser power because we didn't like the way they were using their power. Sometimes when we look at God and we look at the amount of power that He has, we look at God through our eyes and we have so many opinions about what God should do with His power, right? I mean, come on. You've got an opinion about what God should do with His power. I know you do. You can't walk into a gas station without having an opinion about the place. I just know. Well, if it was in my power, I wouldn't have painted it this color, And you know what? If it was in my power, that person wouldn't be working here. I just want to tell you that much. And, this aisle would be a little different, and I would change the flow of things. And we all have opinions in our mind what we would do if we were the decision maker about doing things. And so we definitely have opinions about what God ought to be doing. I hear it all the time. Well, if I were God, there wouldn't be evil. Well, God decided that at one time, didn't He? He decided there's enough evil in this world, and I'm going to take care of this evil. And how did He take care of the evil? With the flood. You know what? If I had unlimited power, there would probably be a flood about every 4 years. At least every 4 years. And it would kind of coincide with the silly season of politics. I just want you to know. It just would. And probably there'd be more floods than that. Probably not just every 4 years, but probably every couple of years. What would you do if you had unlimited power? Because you see, we're pretty hard on God. We want Him to exert His power the way that we want it exerted. And when God doesn't do something our way, and listen, I understand. Some of us have lost so much. Some of us have gone through such pain. Some of us have had so much happen to us. And when we begin to ask, where was God? Why didn't God intervene? And eventually we might get to the idea and the understanding that God didn't intervene because God can't. He is unable. There are those as believers. Hey, I want to celebrate with Corey and Cody. We don't mention this very often. We're so glad that you guys are part of our church, and we just want to give you a round of applause right now. Would that be all right? And their caregivers are so good to bring them every Sunday. We're so glad you're part of our church, aren't we? And I love it because they're usually amening when you all aren't sometimes. And so, anyway, when when God doesn't act on our behalf, there are times when we just go, if I were God, maybe God can't. There are denominations and there are folks, Christians, that believe that God is in control of everything, that God takes control of everything, and that God instructs everything that happens. I want you, and so we come across whenever someone has tragedy in their life or some loss in their life, it must be part of God's plan. And we hear silly things like that. I want you to know, as a member of the Church of the Nazarene, and as a pastor in the Church of the Nazarene, Nazarenes have never thought that God exerted his power in that way. We have never believed that God is the perpetrator of evil in our world. When we talk about God and the power of God, there are groups that believe the most important thing about God is his power. We would say that power is the most obvious thing about God, but the most important thing about God is love and grace and mercy. And when we serve God, one of the things you and I need to understand is that God's power is exerted through love. God's power is, believe it or not, an uncontrolling power. God does not constantly exert his control over you and I. Think about it. The second that you get ultimate power and you start deciding who gets to use what kind of power and how much power they use, eventually you're going to start saying, no, you're getting out of hand, and so we're going to hit the delete button on you, right? Delete. Oh, I don't like what you're doing. Delete. That you over there. No, delete. And you pulled in front of me this morning, so double delete on you, right? And eventually, when people begin to see us exerting our power in that way, all of a sudden their behavior changes a little bit. When am I going to get deleted? What is going to happen with me? And all of a sudden, as we begin deleting the worst of the worst's powers, all of a sudden we realize we're taking freedom not just away from the worst of the worst, we're taking freedom away from everyone. Because everyone is kind of under the idea that at any moment, powerful Steve could take us out. Wouldn't that be terrifying? Who wouldn't you want to have unlimited power? Some of you might say, I wouldn't want it. You want it? I wouldn't want unlimited power. But if I could have it for a moment. When we talk about God, the thing that we need to talk about in his power is that somehow God has chosen love that at times means he will limit his power. Let me show you a time when that happened. I'm going to read a rather long part of Scripture, but see all the moments here when God has given up his power. It's from Luke chapter 23. If you want to find it in the Pew Bible in front of you or online or something like that, Luke 23. I'm going to start with verse 1 and go through about verse 43. So Jesus has just been before the Sanhedrin, and they have accused Jesus, and they've decided we've got to take this the next step. So then the whole assembly rose and led him, Jesus, off to Pilate. Led Jesus off to Pilate. Do you think that at that moment Jesus could have said, not going? And decided not going in a way that made them look really ridiculous? Can you imagine all the fun things Jesus could have done at that point to show up the Sanhedrin? I'm going to turn all of your feet into concrete. I would do it kind of with a sense of humor, that kind of, if I had all the power in the world. Yeah. I just do things that are rather uncomfortable for them or something. But Jesus let them lead him off to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We've found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar, claims to be Messiah, a king." So Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" I don't imagine there was any sarcasm in his voice there. Do you think? Jesus said, "You've said so." Then Pilate announced to the chief priests in the crowd, "I find no basis for a charge against this man." But they insisted. He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here. So he's come all these miles from Galilee to cause problems in Jerusalem. On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he heard that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he goes, "Oh, this is a federal issue, so let's send him to Herod." They sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased, because for a long time he had been wanting to see him. From what he had heard about him, he hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. So here we have, Jesus, do some magic for me. Hey, can you tell me what card I've got? Come on, Jesus, do a trick. He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there vehemently accusing him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. And finally, Herod gets tired of him not answering his questions. He goes, "This guy's a loser. Let's just make fun of him. Let's mock him. He's not worth our time." They dressed him in an elegant robe. They sent him back to Pilate. And that day, Herod and Pilate became friends. Before this, they had become enemies. Here's Jesus bringing the world together. Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I've examined him in your presence and have found no basis for your charges. He's done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and then release him." But the whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man, release Barabbas to us." See, Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" For the third time, he spoke to them, "Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and release him." But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will. As the soldiers led him away, they seized Simon from Cyrene. Seems like Simon from Cyrene is just a guy that's walking by, who was on his way in from the country, and he put this cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. And a large number of people followed him, including some women who mourned and wailed for him. And Jesus turned to them to say, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the time will come when you will say, 'Blessed are the childless women, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if people do these things while the tree is green," meaning while God is in their midst, "what will happen when it is dry?" Meaning when God has lifted his hand of protection. Two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. There's that lottery again. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he's God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine with vinegar, and they said, "If you're the king of the Jews, save yourself. You're the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him, which read, "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God?" he said. "Since you're under the same sentence, we're punished justly, for we're getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong." And then he said to Jesus, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you today, you will be with me in paradise." How does God use his power? How does God use his power in the midst of all of this? See, there's something that you and I need to get straight, and that is this: that God is not a coercive God. He does not make anyone follow him. He does not make anyone love him. In fact, God knows what you and I seem to forget all the time, and that there is one thing ultimate power cannot do, and that is force someone to love you. Hey, this is a great parenting moment also. One of the things some of us parents need to know, and believe me, if you are a parent, you should know a little bit about power, and that is that no matter how much power you have at work and that kind of thing, a 2-year-old can test your power, right? And the next thing that you should know is that quite often our attempts to control other people drives them away from us instead of bringing them towards us, right? Something that you should know for permissive parents also. That for permissive parents, permissiveness can be used as an act of control as well. I'm trying to trick my young person into loving me, and instead I'm being ultra permissive with them, and all of a sudden they think the world revolves around them. What we need to do and need to understand is that God chooses not to force you to love him. Wouldn't that make the world a better place? Isn't that what we all want? Wouldn't that just change things if everybody loved Jesus? So why doesn't God just make everybody love Jesus? Because of the same reason that you can't just make your kids love you. And anyone who has ever had a 13-year-old slam the door and say, "I hate this house and I hate you," understands this. Heard that before. They'll be over it because they're going to want a game for their iPad or something like that later on, and I'm the gatekeeper for that, right? So God is not going to control you in relationship. Jesus never forces anyone to follow. The way that he gets people to follow him is through an invitation: follow me. He tells them, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke on you and learn from me. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." You see, God has also, another thing that you should know, never forced anyone to be righteous. In fact, if we understand righteousness, we cannot force others to be righteous. To be righteous, one has to wish to be righteous, long to be righteous. And true righteousness cannot be forced. It must be accepted. It must be grown, and it must be spread. It must come from a heart of sincerity and a heart of love for God. When we begin to blame God for the things that go wrong in our world and say, "This must be part of God's plan. He's got a plan, and so he had to wipe out your cousin." That's not what God does. See, God is sovereign in his power, but he has allowed us true freedom to choose and true freedom to partner with him. God, that's good news for you and I. That means the things that you do matter. You do realize, don't you, that if someone's got all the power and calls all the shots and makes all the decisions, then that means that nothing anyone else does matters. If you and I had all the power, you know what? We would call all the shots, wouldn't we? Because we want it done right. And what we mean by we want it done right is we want it done our way. And anybody that crosses the line of our way, toast, right? Wouldn't it be good to be God for just a few minutes? Can we just? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. Here's what I want you to know, is that God's power is exerted through love for you and I, and it is not always experienced as love by you and I. Why is it that there is evil in our world? Why does God seem to allow them freedom? Because God allows all of us freedom. Why is it that the evil seem to be blessed at times and that the good seem to be persecuted at times? Because guess what? If we're going to be good and we're going to be righteous, then we're not going to be using force to get our way. God has not forced you or I to follow him. He seeks for our love, and he seeks for us to follow him on our own. I love the story of Corrie ten Boom. She was a Jew during the time of the Holocaust. And she was, in fact, I can't remember, I think she was in Buchenwald, one of the camps where many people were killed. In fact, most of her family was killed. Her mom, her dad, her sister, and some other family members as well. I remember her giving her testimony one time, and we saw it on film, and she talked about meeting the person who actually had done some torture to her and to people and killed some people that she knew, that meeting that person who had somewhat become a Christian. That person didn't recognize Corrie ten Boom, but Corrie ten Boom recognized him. She said she's not sure on the outside what happened, but on the inside she's sure that she turned white and wanted to hide. And all those feelings of anger and all those feelings of revenge cropped up in her. And there was an immediate battle in the midst of her heart where God began to say, no, you need to react to this person in forgiveness. You need, my call to you is not to act in force, not to act in power, because that is actually weakness, but to act in true power and in true love and forgiveness. And she said, I can't tell you how freeing that was to actually forgive. You see, our attempts at righteousness quite often are misguided and mishandled. We use our power our way, and God says, no, I use my power very differently. I use my power that you might be all that you were created to be, to set you free. Aren't you glad that God didn't hit the delete button on you for some of the dumb things you did as a kid? Yeah. How many times this week were you in the principal's office? Delete. I'm glad God shows his power by this, by inviting squirrely kids who do dumb things to follow him and to learn from him and to carry his burden and his yoke because it's light. And each step is a second chance, and each step is a new reason to live, and each step is an expression of the pure power of God, because it is a step that is offered to us in love and in grace. Someone asked me one time, would you rather your kids love you, or would you rather your kids fear you? And then I saw that show, The Office, and I can't remember how he said it. I want them to love me so much that they're afraid of me, or something like that. No, that's not what I want. And you know what? There are times when you go, our kids are just squirrely, and you know what? It might be good for them to fear me at this moment. But you know what? As a dad who's seen his kids walk out of the house and move out of the house and get married and all that kind of thing, I want my kids to love me. I want my kids to know how much I love them. You know what? There's punishment at times in the midst of all of that, isn't there? Kids do squirrely things. We do squirrely things. But in God's perfect love, His love is for us. And Jesus decided at a moment while He was being hung on the cross to forgive them. Father, for they know not what they do. At a moment that I'm pretty sure on all of humanity, I would have hit the delete button. And it is at that moment that we begin to see that if God changes the world, it is not going to be through force. It is going to be through His love and His mercy. Amen? I, for one, am glad that God did not use force to change my life. He used mercy. And that is the way He chooses to go through the world. There is a day coming, says the book of Revelation, when God's righteousness will reign, when Jesus will come as judge, and even then He will come as a loving judge who will judge rightly in our world. I don't know if there's a delete button in the future for folks. I don't know what that exactly looks like, but God will exert His righteousness at some time. I want to be covered by grace and by mercy. Do you not? Do you not? Is God unable? The terrifying thing is that God is able. The terrifying thing is that God could hit the delete button. He could change things. He could exact revenge. But God's dependability and the powerful, powerful thing about God is that He can be relied on for this, that He will do the loving and righteous thing, not just the righteous and judging thing. So we can lean on the love of God and on the cross of Jesus, where He took on our sin. You know what? We talk about Jesus taking on our sin at the cross. It's not just that our sin was heaped up on Him, but Jesus experienced how sinful we can be. And it led to the cross. Can't you just hear some crowds? Don't you just know some folks that would be saying the things that Jesus is saying? There's a whole lot of trash talk going on there that's going on right now between colleges, for crying out loud, as they're playing basketball, right? We love to be in a position of power when our enemy is in a position of weakness. And Jesus put Himself in a position of weakness and stood up to misguided power and reacted with love. Violence seems to be taking over our worlds. Unfortunately, Christian violence is on the rise as well. Not just violence against Christians, but Christians involved in violence. One of the things we need to do is follow Jesus so closely that we learn to pick up the cross as He picked up the cross, that we might exert power in love as well. That is so hard to do. One of the things that is so hard for me to do is to not be a smart aleck. I think I was born with the gift, right? God has tried to temper that gift, He's helped me temper that gift. But sometimes that gift still shows itself. You know, I have found that the real difficult thing, it's pretty easy to be a smart aleck. The real difficult thing is to be someone who's creative in the way that they use their words to encourage and love other people. That is difficult in a world like ours. Everybody seems to have the gift of trash talk. Jesus has the gift of saying these words in a way that are so powerful. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus looks to a criminal next to him and says, my friend, today you'll be with me in paradise. In a world that is violent and harsh, Jesus offers a world of peace and love. Peace and grace, where God's true justice reigns. Amen? Wow. The good news about this story is that it is on your behalf as well. Here's the deal. God's not going to force you to follow him today. But if you will follow him today, those words that he said to the criminal on the cross and to those who were killing him are words that are for you as well. Father, forgive them. I'm sure there have been many times when Jesus looked at me and said, Father, forgive him. It's Steve. And God said, oh yeah. And then I'm pretty sure there are times when he looked at me and said, yeah, you are a criminal. You are someone who does not reflect me well. But this day, come on. This day, join me. Paradise is yours. Hey, that's an offer to you as well. I wish I could force my kids to make the decision to follow Jesus, right? Wouldn't that be great? You can force them to do all kinds of things. You can force them to sit when they're 3. You can force them to attend the school that you want them to attend. But the one thing that you cannot do is to force them to do the things that are right and to love the things that are right and to love the one that can change their life. And you know what? God will never allow you to do that. He says, no. You let me do the inviting. You let me do the inviting. So today, we come before a God who serves his strength upon a cross. What kind of life are you going to live as well? Would you stand with us today? And let's celebrate this King of Kings and Lord of Lords and cheer. I don't know about you, but I needed the songs we sang this morning. And I need this one as well. Let's sing with all our heart. Amen.